Here I'm going to talk about applying media queries to a website. So this website I've prepared in a previous tutorial, and I've got 4 different columns of content, it seems. But the difficulty is when I narrow down the screen width here, or the window width, and you can imagine this will be in a smaller device, well suddenly I run out of room quite quickly. That's because I've got this kind of 4-column format, so it's a bit of a squeeze. What I would like to happen is that as I move down in terms of the window width or the screen size, that we relay out the actual website to suit a smaller screen. First of all, let's look at the code and the way that I've organized the layout so far. I've got a lot of different semantic elements here that I'm using. If you're not familiar with semantic elements, I'm putting a link in the description below to W3 Schools. And we've got a header section, and we've got a main section here. Inside the main section, I've got 3 sections, one for each of the different operas. And then I've got 3 asides, one for SoundCloud, Twitter, Facebook. So each one of those 3 asides are dealing with a separate feed from social media. And then I've got a footer down the bottom. If I was to look at a wireframe for that, this is what it would look like. So again, wrapper div, everything's inside that. Header, 3 asides, a main div. Inside that I've got 3 sections, and they got a footer down the bottom. So that's what we have here. So let's decide where we want to put the first breakpoint. I'd suggest maybe around this area here. It's at that stage where the line width of each of these different columns just gets a little bit too narrow and it becomes bad design. So that's around 1100 pixels. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to go into my style sheet and I'm going to go right down the bottom. Media queries generally are put down the bottom because there are exceptions to the rule. So I'll put in an @ statement, media, and I'm going to write the top line of this media query. So that's my media query set up. I can now include any rules that I want to be exceptions to any rules that have gone before. See here that max width is 1100 pixels. That means that these rules will kick in as soon as the actual window drops down below 1100 pixels. So what should I do here? Well, again, for return to the actual browser, part of the problem is that the wrapper div is normally set to 80% of the width of the screen. But when we get down to a narrow state like this, really we can't afford to waste any width at all. So I want that 80% to change to 100%. So I'm going to override that here. I'm going to target the wrapper, and the width property I'm going to set to 100 pixels, or 100% rather. Let's save that. Let's go back. Let's check and see that it works. So this is about where my breakpoint is, and it's at that stage you can see that little change kicking in. So we're using all of that extra space because the screen is going narrower. What else could I do? Well, I might not be satisfied. I might still want to kind of have more breathing space on the main content. So I need to decide what the main content is. And I've decided that I'm going to prioritize the actual content of the 3 different operas. And the social media, I'm going to deprioritize that. So back in my media query, I'm going to target the main semantic div, and I'm going to set the width of that main to 100%, whereas before it might have been set to 75. Also before, the float property was set to right. I'm just going to set it to left. Now if I save that and go back and refresh, and now we should see that taking over the full width of the screen. Where did the social media go? Well, that's gone down underneath. And we can see that the social media is still stacked one on top of the other. So in this scenario, if I'm going to splay the whole main section across 100% of the width of the screen, the social media is going to go down underneath that. So I'd like to get the float properties on those set to right so they flow in around one another. So the asides, that's what the social media are in. I'm going to target those, and I'm going to say float, right, and width. I'm going to split it into thirds. And just refresh that, and we can see the social media slotting in there in its own space. So again, I've got a nice breakpoint there at 1100 pixels where a few things are happening. A few new rules are kicking in to relay out the actual page to suit a slightly smaller screen. With media queries, I don't have to stop with just one query. I can add in as many different media queries as I want. So as I resize this window downwards, I might like to make some more changes. So about there, if I'm getting to a smartphone size, I might like to get each of these sections, rather than splitting up the screen in 33% each, that they take up 100% of the width. I'm going to start up a new media query. And in this media query, I'm just going to set the section. I'll set the width of that to 100%. I'm going to do the same for the asides as well. So that's my new media query. Let's save that and let's refresh. And so again, we're still just between that 1100 pixels and 500 pixels. So let's keep narrowing the screen down, and there's the breakpoint. Suddenly my sections are taking over 100% of the width. They're all stacked one on top of the other. And I should have my social media asides all stacked on one on top of one another again, and all taking up 100% of the width. So there's my two different media queries applied. There's no hard and fast rules in terms of where your breakpoints should be, or how many media queries you should use, or even if you should use them at all. It really depends on the scenario and the design of your website. So that's it for media queries. Hope you enjoy them, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.